Okay, we're recording. So, today's chapters, hopefully chapters, I want to try to do both today. Uh, Today's chapters is about story time, as Marino already spoiled last time.
I'm not sure if we'll be able to do both. They're kind of long.
Well, it depends on what we're gonna center ourselves in, right? I don't. My plan is to not go like 100%, um, 100% of these stories, but kind of try to highlight what really is the core message out of this story. So there are two stories in the life of the critic part, both from Gabriel and both arguably very sad, very sad
Yeah.
stories. Uh, and it's particularly the first one. There's a bunch of lessons that he got from those stories, and those are very great lessons. So it's essentially the first one is about how he like a short version of some sort of biography, I guess. And the second story is about his period on after Stanford, right? After he was there. Uh, okay, so we first start by the foundation, and the foundation is that he was not. He came from a very humble family. He came from a very humble family, particularly like a more like the countryside. So his family had a farm and so on. And basically, this first story is about the path that he took to try to go into an intellectual academic path or position, I should say. And all things considered, he was above the level of the other children. Like he even says in here, so my parents never sent me to kindergarten, and when I went to first grade, I was put in the class for slow children, and there was a class for normal, but none for fast. After 6 months, so they moved me to normal class, right?
Right.
Um, and he classified himself at the time as a wise guy during this time of his life. But he was something important to mention during this is that he showed interest in writing, right? So we already went through the previous session about the importance that he sees both in writing and reading, and he wanted to attempt to become a writer and a poet ideally. But their parents classified that as a risky move and push him into mathematics because you could always write if you have a job, but you can't. Not having a job, you can't write. That's fair. I would say that's really fair. Um, he did some jobs such as apple picking to help when his father was laid off. And then he was considering Harvard, MIT, or Northern Eastern University to do a mathematics degree. Uh, Northwestern was the safety one, was the safer one, the safety net one. And then there is the first character in this story, aside from the protagonist, which is Joe Sherry. Right. So this character joined the story when he was in his senior year in high school, right? Um, and then this Joe Sherry was an ex-marine. He was Irish. His temper was a little short, and he was the first teacher who had treated the kids roughly. He insulted people and made fun of them, but not, we thought, in a malicious way. He singled out a small group of us who he thought were a little uppity or snotty, and he ragged us. I was one of the ones he felt would always get in trouble by wising off. And this was in the contemporary civilization class, so civics class. Um, there was another character called Ronald Fenerty, Fenerty, which was the English teacher. And then these teachers taught them to choose a topic, make an outline, do an research, write a draft, and write the final paper. We had until the beginning of the second semester to do it, which gave us also Christmas break. And Gabriel chose the topic of megalopolis, the giant city. And coming from the countryside, Gabriel, understandably, had very strong negative opinions about the non-countryside. So he decided to write about that. He decided to write about that. And then there's another piece of news that while he was working on that, he was communicated that he was accepted at Northern University. Um, a Harvard, and then another piece of news came in, which was a Harvard committee to assess student scholarship potential sent something to visit Gabriel and his family. The discussion resolved around some scholarships he could qualify for. When he asked the guy what this meant, it's essentially a 99% chance he's going to get accepted with scholarship, which is great, right? Which is great.
Good news.
Very good news. And then we go back to the part of writing the thingy, the project, which is like a research sort of project. And then Gabriel decided to write a little bit more about it. So with time on my hands, I thought it would be nice to indulge my writing desire and plan to write a preface that would make concrete the abstract things my paper said about the megalopolis. So like an example, the isolation, the dependence on TV instead of on live entertainment, the long commutes. I asked the teachers if I could do this, and they said I could not, but I could write a one sentence dedication. And this is where I think he missed the play. I mean, this is the first misstep. So regardless of the validity of like rejecting a student doing more, if they said no and said you can write a sentence a sentence dedication, you know what this means. You know what usually a sentence means. But he decided to go like um, I'm lying,
What's
but not
technic what's
go.
technically a sentence, right?
No, but that's the thing. He did the this is the misstep because he probably knew what they meant by using this word, but he decided to go pedantic on it and write a 3,000 word sentence.
Yeah, yeah, that's that's technically correct, but it's not really how you write a sentence, my friend.
And that's the thing. Pedantically, you can say I am technically right, but you know what they meant, and you are being a jerk because you want to be a jerk. Well, you can also give him the benefit of the doubt and say that he really wanted to put this part on the project, and he would be willing to be a jerk to get around the limitation. But this is definitely a misstep. This is where things didn't go well, and that's gonna cost him. That's essentially one of the lessons. So he wrote it anyway, a 3,000 word sentence, one sentence dedication. And then this is the real deal. So I dedicated the piece to a typical resident of the megalopolis who is battered by shallow culture, poor jobs, fast pace, and low reward. Someone whose life is barely worth living and whose creative and living juices are throttled by the routine of surviving in a place that is crowded to near death. He is a man unfortunately trapped by the horrors of contemporary civilization and made less a man, less a person by his circumstances. And then that was it. So then he just submitted. He said it is what it is, and then he got the results. So the results, they were an average between the two teachers, right? The two other characters, the English teacher Ronald Fenerty, and the contemporary civilization teacher, which is Joe Sherry. The first teacher, the English one, gave him an A seven pluses on that. But he was a little intrigued. He was a little intrigued. So he decided to sit down with the student and ask him precise meanings of what was written. And then he made a question. If Gabriel thought someone could have taken that personally, as almost he was making an indirect call out for somebody else, Gabriel, in his naiveness, said no, of course not. But then, uh, when they dissected together once again the piece, parallels with the older teacher could have been felt in the writing. Um, Even though Gabriel didn't intend that to happen, that was definitely a reasonable interpretation of what was going on. And that was the problem. Cherry gave it an F, which means that he was very, very disappointed by that. And that's why the A7 pluses was required, because that would average things to a C minus. And then things got worse. Uh, Fairy, when they confronted each other, like Gabriel and Sherry confronted each other, this was his response. Uh, this was his response. Right? So he felt I had been out to make him look the fool in the class, and now he had the chance to get me for it. He said that he had been asked by the Harvard Admissions Committee to write an evaluation of me, and they always asked the civics teachers to assess how aware students were of the world, and it was a way to get a statement from someone not selected by the student. So like a spy, a spy role essentially. Because every high school senior at the time was required to take civics, that would get a recommendation for every applicant from the same type of teacher. And essentially, Sherry would not allow Gabriel to go to Harvard at all. Which is like this sounds evil. Like he explained to me that his goal was to prevent me from going to Harvard and to destroy my future as much as he could. Like that's something to that's something.
That's not something you want to hear from a teacher, right?
uh, that's very not only you don't want to hear, but like what do you respond to such a thing? Naturally, Harvard and MIT did not accept Gabriel, and that caused a 9-year delay to to go to Harvard that we're going to discover later anyway. So again, I think this was 100% avoidable. This was just him like, don't try to be a smartass. Understand what the communication was meant to say. You know what they meant. It's not like you didn't. You would be lying if you said otherwise. This could be avoided. This could have been avoided. But anyway, lessons learned. And then what happened? Then he had to do the other route, which is the no, northeastern acceptance. And he discovered that the acceptance criteria for the other university is kind of garbage. So even if he failed everything, he would still be accepted to that one. And then he decided to try to retaliate, essentially, by going on a strike. So he got a very big hair, probably, and he also started to not pay attention, participating in any classes, and just like doesn't he didn't give a fuck, essentially. He quitted everything extra curriculum he was doing, and he did he confessed he became cynical and a caustic critic because of that experience. They graduated him anyway because he was the second best averages in the entire school. Which again, that's kind of crazy if you think about it.
Yeah.
And then he started studying in the Northeastern University, being a 5-year corporate school. You alternate school with work in order to build a track record for getting a job. The school was not great at the time, but I was not really prepared to worry about the future beyond undergraduate school, with 5 years ahead of me. He studied mathematics. He cared about proving theorems. And then I think it was here that he discovered programming, like computers, sorry. And he learned how to program computers in there. Um, he was completely blown away by the computer, as expected at the time. You put your problem in through our process. You didn't have to think about it. The right answer would come out naturally, as anyone sane would. He decided to stir the philosophy of the mind to try to understand the differences between a human mind and what the machine could be able to do. Right. So uh, to me, that's the natural conclusion. Like everybody that understands that. Wait a moment. Yeah, I'm not gonna take for granted this miracle machine that does things. So I need to understand and identify what would be the differences between the mind and such machine. And there are books about it, such as the famous Godel Eschenbar from Hofstadter, which is essentially trying to understand the same thing. And by the time he graduated, he was a so-so mathematician. He learned how to program in Fortran and assembly. He had applied for other universities, such as MIT, Harvard, Berkeley, Wisconsin, and Minnesota. He got rejected by 3 of them, and the other one offered fellowships for him. He had a girlfriend, and that's important for later.
Yup.
But he needed to go to Boston because of her. And when he was talking to some friends about his interest in the connections between the mind and programming, they said, "Oh, so you are into AI? Interesting." And then he now another character was introduced, which is Patrick Winston. He was associate director of the MIT Artificial Intelligence Lab. He suggested take courses at MIT, so I applied, and he got accepted as a special student. Um, so that gave him some optimism that he could be able to potentially go to the MIT for a year afterwards. Um, he learned that there was a very toxic culture about competition at MIT because people are not friendly in there.
That's terrible.
I agree. It's very bad. Um, what else? What else happened? Oh, he got an average of B plus during that time, and he noticed that people were just like dropped. They'd rather drop than having a bad grade, which is also what happens today. And he got a B in like algebraic topology taught by a category theorist, in which out of 26, only 6 survived. He got a B.
He lived.
He lived to tell the tale. Um, he was given an office on the MIT AI lab on that summer, on the strength of a highly philosophical mathematical essay I wrote that year on computer vision. He wrote 100 pages on that. The summer after that, he met a few more characters, out of which this one is the most important, Dave Watts. Um, Patrick um, was fearful he will not be the lab will not have the funds to be able to keep Gabriel on the MIT on a permanent basis. And then he made a suggestion, which is to go to Dave to University of Illinois, to start an AI lab because the chances of that getting funding were higher. Um, so they moved to that other university, essentially. with the with the invitation from Dave, right? That didn't work out, but he worked towards a PhD in mathematics. He took a bunch of AI courses, but mostly mathematics, less programming. But then he started writing a lot of programming environment code to duplicate the environment they had at MIT, but didn't go so well because of the different OSs. And then they met. They also had ARPA, right, which is Advanced Research Projects Agency. It was having funding problems. People were not enthusiastic about AI at that university, which was a shame. Uh, so they gave up on trying to create the lab on that university afterwards. And then he started to get worried about his own degree after that. And then they asked. He went to the math department and asked how could he get a PhD in AI with from them. And their proposal was to that he would finish all the courses and the examination requirements for a PhD in math, and then he would have written a dissertation that satisfied them as to its mathematics. It would of course have to be proved as an AI thesis by his advisor in his department, well, the electrical engineering department. And then they would also want some approval from external um, PhD people from MIT. It was hard. That sounded scary even for today's standards. Actually, most of this story is even scarier today in today's standards because there's a bunch of
Yeah,
stuff that is completely like not even on the same league in terms of difficulty. This is only the tip of the iceberg. We're gonna have more examples later on the line. And then Dave was one of the full professors on electrical engineering, and he came with another plan, which was to get a PhD in electrical engineering. But that would require some getting out of his bubble and understand antennas and physics and what a resistor is. Um, and then they decided that they could cheat because the professor told me the way the test worked was you take the test, then it's graded and the grades are read at a faculty meeting. If two professors, including a full one, proposes you pass, you pass. And they would do a plan that would allow Gabriel to pass. Um, at the same time, his wife decided that she wanted to go to the school in physical therapy, and the only two graded programs available was at Boston or Stanford. So he applied again to MIT and Stanford. Uh, the advisor, Dave felt bad because they basically brought Gabriel, changed his life to go to another city, another university because of a potential promise of an AI lab that didn't make it concrete. So that was a little bit sad, right? Uh, yeah, this is another thing that, as far as I can tell, this is not a thing anymore, which is called oral exams. And this sounds scary as fuck. You need to be great to survive these type of things. Um, but the professor offered, instead of going through the route of the oral exam, to ask Gabriel to prove a tough theorem. And then Gabriel spent a couple of weeks, several weeks, trying to crack that one. And he actually made it with using a new technique, which is called a simulation technique, that even the professor was unaware of it. And Gabriel went even further, demonstrating that he had a counterexample in which the original technique to prove the theorem would not be able to do it. So that's impressive as fuck. That's impressive as fuck. You have a theorem that is hard. You feel discouraged, and then you actually crack it using a new technique that is even more proper than the one you originally used. That's some badassness I guess.
The force is powerful in him.
The force is powerful. And then what? This is the first lesson of this chapter, which is an isolated good success can be better than a string of mediocre success, because that gave him a strong letter for MIT and Stanford from that professor. Um, he was rejected at the MIT again, but someone at Stanford voted for him. He never got to know who, um, but he was grateful. And then his wife got into Stanford too, and they moved to there. Um, um, yeah, and then he did after he worked for a month straight on his representation, and the strength of my presentation made it too hard for him to vote against me. That was his advisor, um, telling him that he was not confident about his representation, but that was not enough. He made it in 1981. He got his degree. After that, after that, he went back to his hometown and actually met Joe Sherry again. And he did say, "I told you so. You tried to fuck me over, but I actually got something that you could never be able to achieve." Being a jerk as Joe was, he said he did this, which is that he smiled and probably thought to himself that he helped Gabriel by increasing his persistence and resilience. That's just like just own it. Like you didn't help Gabriel at all. You made his life worse. There was a lot of going around the problem that was avoidable, but willing or not, Cherry was the one that caused it. Um, yeah,
And this guy is a teacher, really?
and the guy is a teacher of civics, right? So pretty fucked up. So after all of that, he actually, well, he did the told you so, and then he learned a little bit of things. He learned a few things. One is that once you get a bad break in your education, you have a tough time getting back on track. This is very true. To this day, a lot of people report this that they do a degree of 4 to 6, 7 years, and then they get pissed out of it. They didn't like the experience, and then they do a break of like 10 to 15 to 20 years ish, and then when they decide to go back, it's actually very tough to go back. It's actually easier to never stop and just do the full thing at once. I'm actually gonna suffer from this probably because well, I just finished my master's, right? I'm not gonna be doing a PhD immediately after that, so I'm probably
That
gonna be suffering from this anyway.
that's not what a bad break means, though.
I guess a bad break mean it's a break but worse. Any break, this lesson applies.
Actually, bad break doesn't mean break at all. It just means you got bad luck.
Ah, I see. I didn't get that. Well, uh, but then this is not exclusive to education. Then having a bad luck in anything can be uh, tough to get back on track,
Well, that's why he says, or career for that matter, right?
or life for that matter.
Very
Ho-
deep lessons.
Harvard, I'm sure, originally felt that they were giving an underdog a chance to, or maybe even filling a quota over the disadvantaged students. When that break was taken away, I was looking for graded school years. Later, I faced difficult odds. So he got B pluses average everywhere. The people writing my recommendations were generally unknown to the people making admissions decisions. And then this comes into the second. Well, so the best I could hope for the medium boost up in school quality at each step. And then there's the second lesson, which is that being smart is largely learnable, which is very interesting because that when he was at Northeastern, mediocre as it was then, I had a tough time adjusting to the way people talked and how smart they were. Keep in mind that every year only a handful of students in my high school years went to real college, so there was no pressure at all to be smart. I learned how my peers at Northeastern thought and what I had to know to be like them. After a year, I was pretty comfortable there. When I went to MIT for that year, I never quite caught up to the students, but I came pretty close, average A minus. At the Illinois, it took another step up, and though it took me took him a couple of years, I finally moved on to the same field as most of my fellow students at Stanford. I feel like as though I learned to be smart rather than having been born that way. Maybe this belief is all wet, but I feel strongly that it is true, and I think we should encourage people. Yeah, I also have the same experience. So here at our study group, I'm definitely the one behind. I'm still trying to keep up with everybody that is more than me. And my honest opinion and humble opinion, after 2022, which is when we started, I am definitely smarter than I was back then. Maybe not. I haven't met the level of my peers, but this is definitely true for like it's learnable. Actually,
You can do it, Lemus. I believe in you.
it is learnable. Well, I'm trying my best. And then it comes the sad truth that relationship and connections matter. This was always true. This is always going to be true. This is why you can't be a developer. Actually, no, it's not that you can't. You're going to be doing a very. You're going to make your life worse, like more difficult, if you just act like a nerd in a cave, like an hermit. You can do it. That like there are stories of people succeeding doing that, but it's very low chances. You highly increase your chances if you just talk to the right people, connect with them, be friends with them, and that's what Gabriel learned. That actually that was a must-have thing for his this story. Now at Stanford, I sit almost every year on the PhD admissions committee, and I see that unless you went to perfect schools the whole time, got perfect grades, got walk on water letters of recommendation for people whom the committee members know personally, you don't get in. Some of the friendships I made at MIT made a big difference to me later, for example. And then the fourth lesson is that every now and then you need to do something that grabs attention. For me, it was the long essay on vision, the new proof on a tough result, and, and the well-rehearsed oral exam. So yeah, so making an impactful contribution to the world eventually is gonna be something that's gonna boost everything up. This is also true, right?
Yeah. Doesn't matter what you're doing if you're not noticed, right?
Um, it's not that it doesn't matter. It matters. It's not because somebody's not paying attention to something awesome that the thing is not awesome. However, in order for you to boost your chances of getting to your goal, you're gonna have a very hard time avoiding having an impactful contribution of any sort. So there's that.
All
Um,
right.
okay. And then the message in this says that you don't need to have a silver spoon in your mouth at birth to make it. Even though breaks can be overcome, even tough breaks can be overcome. If you have half a brain, you can learn to be smarter, and if you work collegially, your friendships could pay off. So hang in there. Yeah, this is the most anime conclusion possible, right? This.
Based.
Yeah, like this is what probably thousands of fiction stories are talking about.
You must persevere.
Yeah, it is cliche as fuck, but it is true. Uh, yeah, like we can complain about like the bad things about some particular stories, but all the child the child Dragon Ball Z moments. They were there, and they were talking about all this. So they had a point. I would say they had a point. And we are halfway through, so 35 minutes. So we have 25. Let's try to go through the second story. That was the story on how he went from nothing to Stanford. Right. Now we're going to go from Stanford onwards. Um, because there was also some very hellish experiences in here. Um, yeah, so the previous essay about my life started in the middle of my passion on writing, told the story in which the passion led me to start my technical career on the wrong foot. Looking back, I feel that I could fold my life like origami into three parts, in which 1967 butts up against 1991, and to be a continuous picture of an aspiring writer trying to make it. And when you unfold it, the middle 24 years look almost like someone else's life. I asked myself whether that long detour was there just to prove that I could recover from the error I made, from Sherry's wrath, from the switch from Harvard to Northeastern, and the slow uphill. When he arrived in California from Illinois to attend Stanford in late summer, when he was looking for a house, he was to look for a house. He was pretty amazed. Yeah, so this is essentially yeah, so how beautiful the that part of California was. As a grad student, he was making 650 a month at University of Illinois. At Stanford, he would make 330, and the housing was easily 3 to 4 times more expensive. And then he found in Palo Alto, which is like a reference to the Dealers of Lightning, a one for 285. And then they drove there. Gabriel and his buddies, I guess. I got in a red 1973 Volkswagen Beetle and headed across country. We had spent part of the summer in New England, so it was a true cross-country trip. And there was no air conditioning in the car. There was a dog there, so probably pretty hot. And they also slept on the floor of a friend's house. They were not the friends were not there, but they left the key there. So what an experience, sleeping on the floor.
Crazy.
I actually did that for quite some years because during university time, if I slept on my bed, I ran the risk of missing my alarm and miss the exams and the classes. So actually, I slept on the floor quite a few times, quite a what, dozens of times maybe, because making it uncomfortable helped me not missing my alarms.
I see.
He was, as we know, he was white-balled into the Stanford one. Um, but in there he was at the bottom of the barrel in terms of the level of the students in there. He was assigned a project directed by this guy. Um, he wanted to go to the Stanford AI lab, but he was assigned to campus, unfortunately. And then he talked to Joe McCarty into supporting him into doing some Lisp stuff. Um, and then there's a bunch of like explanations on how the things smelled, the smell of the place, and the try to have a picture of the entire thing. I don't think we need to go through that, but this is essentially like some draft on what things looked like there. Um, so all of this is description. All of this description. Um, also, this is also description. Yeah. So here we discover that Gabriel used Lisp for quite like he used in years to do his AI stuff. Um, he also ported MacLisp from ITS to Weights. Um, more references to Dealers of Lightning, so they had a PDP-10. and they actually use the foundation of the internet.
Actually, it would be more accurate to say dealers of lightning references that those things because they came first, right?
No, I don't know. What was the
Now,
year of this?
no, no, like Palo Alto is an actual place. PDP-10 is an actual computer. It's not like, well, it's not like this is a deliberate reference to dealers of lightning. It's just they are
No, no,
talking
no.
about the
It's
same
no,
stuff.
it's not a deliberate reference. Just because, as far as my understanding goes, well, actually, I can't tell because he's talking middle like 1970s, right? So I don't remember, but PDP-10 is what 1975 or something like that. And I also remember that ARPANET is also 70s. But I'm not saying it's a deliberate reference. It's just because I know these terms because I read because dealers of lightning explain the story about the ones that created it. So this thing, Paulo Alto having the lab. I highly recommend that book, by the way. Um, and there was a sauna and showers in there for whatever. Well, showers I can understand. The sauna is kind of weird. More display. There was a volleyball court in there. Anyway, yeah, this is more like the display system deserves more mention. Remember, I'm talking about 1975, and the system has been in place for 5 years. And then there was this technical description. The video rate was 19,200 bytes.
Um, Bits actually,
Bits,
because
sorry.
yeah,
Uh, this video can switch. The video switch can allow people to observe other people's screens, which help people work cooperatively without working from office to office. Oh, though it was a time sharing computer. I should mention that, which means that it's a CPU that is um, doing um, well. It's doing what's it called?
you can have multiple users basically sharing the same machine.
Yeah, but it's like what's the name of what's the verb that the CPU keeps switching the processes? It's preemptive. I forget the word.
Preemptive concurrency.
Not concurrency. I can grab the word later. It's not that one.
Time sharing. Well, actually, time sharing is the term you used first.
Anyway, Gabriel had the realization that his dreams may be coming true. Um, and he was working very hard towards his research on that direction. Um, and then to do that required passing two tests: writing a dissertation and defending it. One test was a comprehensive exam, which tests well to go into that lab, like go into that reality that he's describing. Um, uh, the test was broken into several parts: numerical analysis, hardware analysis, algorithms. Yeah, all of this is 100% harder during that time than today. Today we don't have to probably to do any of these things. The standards are much lower, the bar is much lower, so you probably don't have to do all of these portions. Um, the test has to be assigned within 2 years, and it could be taken only 3 times. That stuff. And the other
Very
test
tough.
was the qualifying exam in your area of expertise. It was an oral exam that tested depth of knowledge, whether you knew enough to do research in the area. Like this is real deal. Like this is like, are you worthy of doing research on this area? So he's gonna do the both tests, right? So meanwhile, there were finances to worry about. His wife enrolled in the Master of Physical Therapy program. It was a full-time student, and they had to like we essentially do a like have more uh, what you'd call it, more people living the same place to try to make the finances a little bit easier to pay. So they found some friends to help with that. The quote that year was unique. That professor was working on a handbook of AI, which would present short introductory essays on AI topics. He also chaired the qual committee for AI. He decided that people taking the qual that year would write 13 short essays for the handbook, some selected by the individual and some selected by the committee. And the essays would be judged to determine whether you passed. Because I preferred written to oral essays, I signed it up. He signed it up,
Of course he did.
of course. The comprehensive had a long reading list, and again, he didn't have that strong CS background. He had more like a mathematics, theorem proving, AI background. Coursework was not very demanding because the rule was to get a PhD, you need a certain number of units or course hours, and those units to be spread among at least 4 different professors. Um, he had to write like the schedule was tight to make that happen. And then the reason it took a week was a programming. Well, the programming problem was tough because he was planning to work 18 hours on it per day, on a day. So it was a tough problem. And then they had some personal and family issues that essentially made him keep uh, he lost track of the schedule that he made from himself. Um, at the test, this is actually a little very funny. In the test, you actually can consult, well, because it's a real thing. It's like in the real world, you're always going to have books to guide to use as reference to your thing, and you have the limitation is how many you can carry. So that's like okay, that's interesting.
That's uh that's a very subtle way to encourage people to exercise, right?
Exactly, like you have a bonus benefit. The problem was hard. The programming problem was hard. It was to invert a very large sparse matrix. It, it they people there were warned that they would be using the time sharing system to prevent menace for the that would potentially happen during that week. The Lisp dialect implementation was a little different than he was used to, so he had a bunch of little bugs that, especially in the dynamic language, can take a lot of your time because you're gonna only discover that actually in this Lisp, this syntax means something else after you run that portion of the code. So that can take a while. That can actually take a while.
Yeah,
Uh, and he had an average, like actually not average, 15 hours of sleep throughout the entire week. That's
that's
tough.
that's like 2 hours a day.
That's very tough. I actually had some very bad experiences with that at the university as well, like 4 days in a row sleeping like crap. But first, not 15. I think my worst of the worst that I ever did in my life was 3 days with 2 hours of sleeping, and that's it. That was tough. It was required to survive at the time, but that was tough. Um, okay, so yeah, so then he went into the conclusion that nobody was paying attention to the essays because there were people that didn't give a shit about it and they passed. And then, but he failed, right? So, but he failed in one of the steps of the many steps that he just described, and that put him into a deep depression because he was questioning himself if he was up to the task. He was sure he was not up to the level of the other his colleagues, and he seemed like the dream was of finishing the PhD was over. He didn't even talk to his friend that would leave because the friend passed and he didn't, and he was embarrassed. But then he got back up again. An anime story. He got back up and he was starting to read 8 to 12 hours a day, like a champ. And then another character is introduced to the story, which is Ron. Right?
Right.
Ron moved into the Bill's old room because Bill was participating on sharing the finances burden. Ron also failed the comp, so they had a time together. They actually helped each other study. Um, but this other time, the programming problem was easier. He managed to finish in 4 days instead of a week. Our classmate had not quite passed the written part, so he needed a high pass on the programming problem. He spent 20 hours a day writing a knockout program, wanted to use natural language input. We all three passed, but I can't remember if I got pass on a high pass. And then there is the unconventional uh, the nature of Gabriel, because usually people pass the comp, then pass the qual, but he did the other way around because he passed the qual and didn't pass the comp. Um, Fortunately, instead of being jerks about it, they said, "Okay, this is unusual with your processes, but what matters you did what mattered, so we're not gonna fail you because of that." I'm 100% sure that if this was a Brazilian 2025 system, that would not
Yeah.
have happened there.
Yeah. Because Brazil, basically.
Because Brazil, man. He switched from robot vision to natural language generation, and this other character is introduced, which is the Terry as his advisor. He was hooked up into Cordell's Green Research Group, which needed a simple natural language generation system. I did some reading in the area and found that almost no one had done any work, so I set off on my own. Terry was, how can I say, a charismatic figure for the MIT. He was handsome, well spoken, smooth, and compelling as a speaker. Um, yeah, and that's good because they needed the money for the AI research. After MIT, Terry became a scholar more than a researcher, though he still did some research. It never amounted to as much as he did before. And then Gabriel focused 100% in writing his thesis program. And then I actually advocate for this. Volleyball is awesome. Everybody should play volleyball. I'm actually it's a shame that I'm short because if I was taller, I would be able to play more seriously. Um, then things started to go off the rails.
Of course they did.
Of course they, of course they did. Uh, Essentially, Gabriel promised to finish the PhD in 3 years. So that means he would have only 1 year to make it, and his wife wanted to start a family, but he would definitely not meet the deadline because it took him almost 2 years to pass the tests, which I think it's very like understandable. Like it's almost um, as his family and his wife were not comprehensive to what he was trying to do and what he was doing. Maybe that at the time the bar was so high that it was like the expectation was that yeah, if you're good, you're gonna be able to do it. I expect you to do it. You promised me 3 years. We are going to the final year. It's your problem, not mine. I can understand making a promise like that. It's just that I feel maybe because we are reading his biography that um, it's understandable that okay, it took him 2 years to pass the test because the tests were hard as fuck. Like, yeah, like who's gonna die because of that? I don't know. Which is actually also something to keep in mind that they were still married, and according to um, and then uh,
Yeah,
uh,
that happened.
And then that happened that his wife got pregnant, but then he panicked, and they had the pregnancy terminated. The woman, of course, was very affected by that. His parents felt doubts based on my inability to finish quickly, and they started telling their friends that I had dropped out of Stanford and become a plumber. Like again, that's what I'm talking about. Like, what is the benefit of what exactly is he losing by doing 1 or 2 plus extra years than 3? Like, what are we talking about? Again, maybe it's just because today the bar is lower that I am finding this unreasonable. Maybe at the time, because the standard was high, this was the expectation. I don't know. You were on a schedule of classes and you didn't graduate when you were supposed to. It meant you were being held back. So my family was recommending that I simply give up and get a job because, well, they are starting to get anxious about their son. Now they had a son in 1979, but I don't know if I'm interpreting the timeline correctly, but I think they got the divorced, right? Divorced, because this is what this leads me to believe, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
That's also what I got from this, yes.
Because in her interpretation, the wife's interpretation, he didn't want to take care of the child happily. Well, she was accusing Gabriel of that. He started on 1975 on Stanford. In 1980, he was ready to prepare my oral. So like 5 years have passed. He promised 3. We are on 5. Uh, he started writing a draft of his dissertation. The system was part of a larger system that accepted English input concerning what a program should do and produced that program, including doing somewhat sophisticated complexity analysis. My part of the system was to take the input of a program that was developed and describe it in order to convince the user that the program generated corresponded to what was desired. And then there is McCarthy's advice taker goal, which is if a program is able to do something by figuring out what to do, it should be able to do what it should be able to be told what to do. I thought that thesis was the natural language generation after all. That's what the program did. However, like many AI folks, I designed and wrote a complete programming language and an execution environment that made the actual programming easier. And that he called a framework. That sounded to me more like a programming language, to be honest, like just
Maybe an
programming
operate
language.
maybe an operating system even, depending on how involved this was.
Yeah, if like because this is essentially the language and this is the runtime.
Yeah.
If it's intimate related to the hardware, then we can call it an OS, I guess. Two of the things I was particularly interested in was able to have the style of writing vary and to have the competence of the system increase by adding relatively small pieces of knowledge. Um, it took him a while to understand this, however. I wrote a draft and put together a presentation. The orals are an examination in which the candidate presents his or her thesis to the public, including a 4-person orals committee. So this is essentially the defense, like today's master's defense or PhD defense. It's also public, and it also has a 4-person committee to this day. Probably the rules of which 4 people changed, but 4, regardless.
Why specifically 4 though?
Today is because it's your advisor, 2 people from the university, from the department of your area, but from the same university. Actually, no. Your advisor, 1 from the department and your university, and 2 outside people. 2 outside people for PhD. That's why it's 4. That's why it's
Okay.
4. Mine was 1, my advisor, 2 people from my university, and 1 person from outside. My master's defense. That was the organization. I think PhD is 2 outside people instead. Um, the presentation is followed by public questioning. This is also true, by the way. Well, in today's, at least Brazilian masters and PhD, First there is the questioning from the committee, and then the public questioning. Right. So there is an order
I
of execution here.
I see.
But there they started with the public one, which to me makes a lot more sense because these are the easier ones usually, like not usually, 999% of the time. And then after that, the questioning of the committee starts, but it's in private. Today it's public. And then finally the committee gets together and decide whether the candidate should pass. This still happens, and this decision-making process happens in private. All this happens in the space of a morning and afternoon. Yeah, my defense took 6 hours, I think. 6 hours? 5 hours? Something like that. It was very long. Like it was something between 4 and 6 hours. I don't remember anymore, but it was very extensive. So the presentation I put together was my Oros dry run. I presented it. He presented, and it bombed, badly. And then he presented more, and it bombed again. But his friend was there. Right, Ron was there. Uh, and then he started helping Gabriel. What a nice guy.
Based.
It was doing this process, and I realized that the book of the work was on system building, not natural language generation. We refined the presentation and gave it to the group again and again and again. And he basically presented 20 times. Like this is way above what I usually do. Like I presented a few times. I present a few times. I discussed with my advisor a few times, but 20 is a lot. And then the real advisor, which is Terry, was always like with eyes on it, on let us say like that. And he was getting anxious about it because Gabriel was the first of his actual advisees to graduate. I was graduating some 6 or 7 years after Terry arrived. This is not good for either of them. My draft emphasized natural language, even though the book of it was about the way the system and the framework were put together. Um, and then the advisor said you should not do your orals in September. I don't think it's ready to go. Um, well, then when he failed the comprehensive exam, he was down for 6 months, unable to socialize and even be with people. I would sit in my living room. Well, he would sit in the living room, just calm down, listen to music, dreaming about what I would do with my life after given my most recent failure. And this is very interesting. This is very, very interesting. Um, that the protocol that his mind developed to tackle failure is to generate failure on his dreams, but progressively change the failure to a triumph. And I found that to be very interesting. Um, his favorite picture was him in a rural western Kansas farming a small spread with a wife who would have come from some mysterious place from which he was running. Well, essentially very nice life, a dream, right?
Right.
He would picture his wife and me holding hands, looking west and toward our small farmhouse, tall, cottonwoods, and a light in front of it, the sun dipping behind, the sky smeared red. Like very, very majestic description. She would have blonde hair, uh, and then everything would go out of the rails. Like a suicide dream would start after that. But then that's the cool part because dreams like that were how I dealt with most of my failures. After rejection, my dreams sad and tragic dreams like this, and eventually they would turn into triumphs. Triumphs. For example, after Sherry cast me out of Harvard heaven, I dreamt of sublime obscurity until the dreams turned into me walking across a prestigious university as a revered professor. So like, it's almost like your thought have for his particular case, his thoughts were kind of like a prediction of the future. So that's very interesting to think about.
Yeah, it's like he's slowly changing the space that his mind is in until it becomes
True.
true, essentially. Yeah.
Yeah, because when you think about doing something, you tend to do it. For example, if you're thinking about getting better at grammar, you get better even if you don't study it at all. This happens because partially consciously you try to steer away sentences you're not sure about and toward ones you are certain about it grammatically. You pay more attention to edit writing like newspapers for models. Just thinking about it makes it true. Just thinking about it. I wanted to be a writer, but my dream of walking across campus took over, and I made my goal academic success. In a lot of ways, this is a good trait. I fail at something I dream, I get better at it both through the effect I just described and by studying practices, whatever. But sometimes you fail at things you don't really care about. I suspect I tried to become an academic because I happened to fail at an attempt to become one that was really half or quarter hearted. Then I dreamt, then I act. Terry's comments sent me down, but Ron picked me up. So the friend again, helping him, and the advisor being the problem. Uh, um, but Terry kept the pressure that he was afraid he would fail, and Ron said, "No, it's fine." Uh, oh, this is okay. Here's the formation back then. It's made of one thesis committee, someone outside your area within your department, and one outside of the university. Yeah, so the essence is still the same to this day. The three people on my thesis committee were these people. So Terry, the advisor, Gordon Green, and Dave from back then. As September grew closer, Terry's warning increased in degree and frequency. He began to panic, naturally,
Of course.
very naturally. And he started to take drugs to try to sleep, asking a random blonde woman friend. Uh, my wife and parents had long since given up on me. Yeah, but that's what I'm talking about. Is the wife still there or not?
I think they do divorce, but it's later, if I recall correctly.
When I went into my reaction mood, I always painted the worst picture possible. Of course, that picture never came true, which was part of why I survived. I knew rationally the worst case scenario could never happen, though emotionally I believe it must. So it didn't, and I was bolstered emotionally. Yeah, this is a very normal protocol to act, or at least for me. When I told my family that my advisor was not confident, they thought it was one of my pessimistic scenarios. And then the day arrived, right? The day before the order was arrived, he practiced 5 times in a row, minor corrections. It was a true projector presentation, which I'd never seen before, to be honest. I'm actually very surprised that because that kind of sounds like a good idea if you think about it. But I'd never seen it before.
Sounds interesting, actually.
Um then Terry said that he was planning to vote against my passing. Ron said not to believe him, but Ron was not on my committee, of course. He can't remember if he slept the night before or not. He took the drug to try to calm him down, probably twice the normal dosage, which is you should not do that. Uh,
And then he followed a ritual apparently.
yeah, he walked there. He walked through the place that's gonna give the oral. Uh, yeah, so I paced the room and made it familiar, almost like a dog or a cat. At 12:45, the audience arrived, and 10 minutes after 10 minutes later, my committee. Refreshments were served. Um, the blonde woman was there. Um, so things started. He started oddly calm, probably because of the drug. Watts seemed to be sleeping, essentially. The blonde woman who went smiled back. No, that's a good sign, I guess. Somehow he was confident. Ron apparently accomplished this, so he made it. I'm always panicked, nearly to tears before I speak, but once I start, I'm fluent and cogent, as at no other times except sometimes when I write and the material just takes off on its own. The true projector idea was worked great.
Mm.
He practiced it a lot. It went very smoothly. When the questions started coming, each one had been answered 5 to 10 times already in practice sessions. He even had already slides prepared for some questions, which means very high levels of confidence. Um, and then they went for the private session. Well, they were about to start the private session. Um, they heard very bad rumors about the private questioning, like unreasonable questions in there. And then he sat outside while people in the audience filed past and congratulate me. And then after 15 minutes sitting down there, preparing for the words for the private session, um, and then Terry passed by, saying that he passed, and it was a great presentation. And then the orals happened in his wife's birthday, September 12, 1980. I had told her I would drive up to the lab for a while before coming home. Yeah, so this leads me to believe that they didn't divorce back then, when they had the child in 1979.
Yeah, this is. I think it's later. I think it's later.
Um, yeah, then he had the moment of like realization and like description of the moment, so things like that. He grabbed a drink from the pony machine. He spent 1 hour and drove home. He never learned what happened in that room, and I also never learned what happened in mine.
Of course.
I only know that they took 40 minutes to discuss privately, and that's most of what I know. I know a little bit more details, but not. I never. Apparently, it's a ritual thing. It's a taboo thing to talk about what happens in these private sessions publicly. I mean.
I see.
Uh, I imagine they talked about the stress I was under, and Terry talking about how they didn't think of my thesis was good, but trying to not spare me, try to, why not just spare him their humiliation, pass me without further torment. He waited 13 years to ask, and they couldn't really remember what happened, but they had vague recollections of thinking I had done an impressive job. Um, he handed his dissertation 3 months later and started my marginalized career believing I had sneaked out with a degree. It didn't feel that way. I thought it would. There was no victory, no sense even of having been successful. More like I had stolen something, and I had no allies but Ron and the woman with the very long hair, that the committee would just as soon forget what happened. Perhaps they felt I would amount to nothing, so their mistake would not be devastating. And then the conclusion, which is that sometimes when you read a resume, it seems that there is a constant upward motion of one success after another. One grand title followed by one even more grand. What you don't see is that the steps are sometimes achieved with difficulty or only barely, that the toll is high and the sacrifice is almost too much to bear. But also you don't see the resume for the other parts of the person's life. We can see the professional climb, but how did he handle his mother's death, her failed marriage. Climbing is hard, and rarely is the trail constantly upward. Which is a very fair conclusion, very fair, and
Very
very
grounded.
very grounded. Exactly, very realistic, I would say. And that's pretty much it. 1 hour and 15. We managed to do both chapters. I would say that, of course, we didn't go through all the details because if we would have done that, it would not be finished by now. But I think we did a fair description of these stories. What do you say?
I agree. This is an interesting story. Like, it has nothing to do with technical things, like much, other than he's in a university studying AI. Back when that actually meant something, right? Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think it's I think it's very interesting. It's a very good story.
Yeah, very very inspirational.
Very well
Uh,
written as well.
yeah, very well written as well. I agree on that. Okay, and then this is the final part of the book. Unfortunately, not gonna be able to finish this in one go next time, but it's part five, Into the Ground. So there's 20 pages about Lisp, I think, then 20 pages of C++, if I'm not mistaken.
This is like basically okay. I went to university. What happened afterwards, right?
Probably, maybe. I haven't read yet. So then we have more pages of C++, and then a lot of pages about C++ actually.
Yep.
Yeah, then Money Through Innovation Reconsidered, which, well, we're gonna talk about the whole incentives about things.
Yep.
Uh, and then there's another chapter after that. Wait,
He talks about the right thing versus better here. Yes, he does.
yeah, that's what I thought. That's what I thought. Interesting. I'm very excited to talk about that again. It's always great to talk about that. And then I think there is another chapter. Yeah, the epilogue. And then that probably finishes the book. Yeah, two pages of epilogue and then it's done. Yeah. So that's what we're gonna be doing the Lisp one first, then the C++. So there's actually like three more sessions. The Lisp, the C++, then this.
And the
Uh,
epilogue can be together because it's 2 pages, right?
exactly. I'm gonna finish the recording now.
All right.